topics to preparation for the exam. I think I kind of ran through some of this in the previous class, but basically, I think in the same way in which the midterm exam was pretty representative of the things that we had focused our time on, the same thing will hold true for the final exam, in that there shouldn't be anything that blindsides you and that you're wondering, well, where did that come from? So it should all be certain, especially the things that are going to be the most amount of points will be the things that we spent the most amount of time on. And so it is cumulative, so you'll want to take your midterm exam and look at the things that you did well in the midterm exam and make sure that you can do those well on the final, and the things that you didn't do so well on, make sure that you can do those correctly on the final exam. My guess, and I haven't written it yet, but my guess is it's usually somewhere around 30 or 35% of the points are from the first half of the course, and so there's that. Things that are just mindless memorization, I will provide for you. So, for example, if you, and in fact, I can actually put on Blackboard the reference material that I'll be including. So, I'll upload to Blackboard the reference items that I will include. I won't include how to get from binary to hex. That's something you just ought to know. And I also won't be including the steps to go and do a sum of products representation, because that's not mindless memorization. That will be of use after the course. So, but I will put up what reference materials I'll be providing. I would say that the major topics were also topics that we had projects around. So the disassembler and kind of the flip side of that, you already had plenty of questions on that on the midterm exam. So I think you should have a pretty good idea of what to expect there. And then in terms of caches, the most obvious thing is you'll be getting both direct mapped and set associative. You'll get a sequence of address, or you could get a sequence of addresses, or just an address. You need to go and show what the tag slot or set number is and the block offset, or a sequence of addresses and you specify what's a hit and what's a miss. That type of basic thing. Also kind of some conceptual things that there could be a few multiple choice or true false questions in terms of what organization gives you the best hit speed? Well, that's going to be a direct map. What one gives you the best hit rate? That's going to be a set associative. Those type of conceptual questions. But as with the midterm, more often than not, most questions will have a quantitative number that is the answer. There will be a few, or there'll probably be a few true falses or multiple choices. So there'll be that, but certainly no essay questions. And again, the major topics, like I said, you had them in projects. You'll see something from the single cycle data path as well as the pipeline data path, and but you don't have to have memorized the control signals, because you'll have a table just like you did on the practice single cycle data path exam. You'll have a table that describes what those signals are. And as I said, nothing on the multiplication that we covered tonight. So before we get into covering specific topics, any questions about what will be on the exam? You'll have the full, I don't know if it's full 3 hours or 2 hours and 45 minutes, whatever.
Actually, I think the period was 6 to 8, so only 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
At least that's what it says online.
Okay. Okay. I will double check that. Obviously, I'll follow whatever the rules are. Let me just jot that down, and I will send out an email to that effect. Okay, yeah, I'll let you know, and I'll adjust accordingly. I will try, you know, if it's 6 to 8, then I'll make the exam a little bit shorter, so it's not gonna be a matter of just, you know, who can rush through it the most quickly. Yeah.
Will the exam be in this room?
Yes, virtually, I didn't even bother checking, it's always in the same room, so, but I will double check. And as I mentioned last week, arranging for a room the hour ahead of time is problematic, but I was scouting around and it looks like at least at this point, there are rooms that are open. I noticed that 207 is open, so I will be here at 5 o'clock next, in 2 weeks. No class next week. In 2 weeks when we have the exam, I'll be here at 5 o'clock for any last minute review that you would like. And if we, and I will post on the door what the room number is. And if I can't find a room, because actually the first floor is all lab space, I went down and double checked. But if we can't find one, then we'll just huddle over in that little corner area around from the restrooms, and we'll just make do as best we can in that area. But it's looking as though things aren't quite as tightly packed at this point in the semester as they were earlier. And so the first place I'm going to look is going to be room 207, because that's a free room at this point. So, so any other questions about the overall exam? Yeah.
So I know that you are not going to provide the hex and binary numbers. Can we do it? Can I do it myself and then bring it to class and I can show you this is what I have?
Well, no, you need to know that you can do it. Well, you
like hex, and because I made a lot of mistakes last midterm.
Right.
By putting them on the paper. So
Yeah.
if I could just have that.
Well, you can't do it before the exam and then have it during the exam. If you do it before the exam and want me to double check it for you and then I hold on to it, then I will do that. But you can't. This isn't like an extra reference sheet. I want you to know that. Sorry.
Okay.
Because it's a technique that you want, that is useful to software engineers, and so you want to be able to know that you want to have confidence that you're doing it correctly. And you know, even if we only have the 2 hours, take 2-3 minutes to put it down on take the first 2 or 3 minutes of the exam and do it and just double check it. And but it should be kind of easy to make up that table, because you're just adding 1 to each binary number and then just succeeding up, and those will be the 90% of the points on the exam. So I was just being a wise guy for you.
Wait, so you're recording?
Oh, the recording. That was why he was. You didn't look too worried. So yeah. So, anyways, in terms of making that up, I mean, if you just kind of relax, just take the time and just add 1 to each number. You should be able to go and get it right. So, but anyway, sorry, I'm not giving you the answer you want on that one.
Okay.
Other questions about the overall before we get into covering topics in detail?
What kind of questions with having data hazard and
Oh, okay. So the question is, what kind of questions would there be on data hazards? I could go and give you a sequence and you tell me, okay, which identify like which registers are involved in a data hazard, or tell me based on this sequence if when you fetch this first instruction, if that's clock cycle 1 in this whole sequence, tell me on what clock cycles forwarding is taking place. That type of thing. There will, as I promised, there will be questions on super pipelining and the effect on hazards. So you can count on that, and that can be a topic we go into in more detail after we go through this general thing. But you know, identifying, you know, what are the values that are going into the ALU in this sequence in clock cycle number 3? Well, if you know how forwarding takes place, then you'd be able to identify that. So those are the kind of things where it'll be a quantitative type answer. Okay. Other generalized questions before we get into trying to clarify topics?
Will there be something similar to the midterm where we have to fill in the cache? Is there going to be something similar to that on the final?
Yeah, I would expect that to be the case, only I think for the midterm, you only were responsible for direct map caches and only where you could pull everything out of the hex digits. You'll need to be able to get into the binary. I will still almost certainly make it so that there are more points associated with just pulling things out of the hex digits, but you can almost count on needing to get into the binary for
So we're going to be
one of
filling a
those.
cache on the final as well?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mentioned earlier, the final exam is cumulative.
Okay.
So it'll be 30 to 35% probably of material from the first half of the class. And so the real highlighted topics will be returning on the final. Other big picture content type questions? Okay, well then, let's get into topics you want me to cover, and obviously, if you think of a big picture question, it's not as though you've lost your chance. You can go in and ask that as we're going along, or also, if you have a question that comes up after our session tonight, you can email both Karen and myself. Yep.
I had an analogy for understanding pipelining. I want to make sure it's an apt analogy, because if the difference is single cycle data path, it's one cycle that's stretched out versus pipeline where pipeline where it's 5 cycles, but they're much shorter cycles. Is it fair to say that with using an automotive analogy with like the Ford Motor Company assembly line, it took 12 hours to manufacture a car, but by the time they used the assembly line, it reduced down to, on average, 90 minutes per car because they're doing it in parallel.
Overlapping. Yep.
With pipelining, is it still fair to say that if a process takes X amount of time with single cycle data path, it will take X amount of time with pipelining, but on average, because you're doing everything at the same time, it will, on the average time of the task, will be reduced dramatically?
Yeah, if we looked at that, let's just use nice easy numbers, which are archaic numbers, but let's just say start to finish it would take you 5 nanoseconds to do a load word, because a load word does every single step. If it took you 5 nanoseconds to do that, you would need to go, and assuming that each step was identical, which is a fallacy, but we're just simplifying here. So with a single cycle data path, you need to set the clock cycle time to be 5 nanoseconds, so it got the whole thing done. If the 5 steps to do the load word were all identical in terms of time, and we're just saying that to go and simplify the concept, then each of the 5 stages would be one nanosecond, and it still would take 5 nanoseconds from start to finish to complete the instruction. But because you're overlapping that execution, as with an assembly line, with other instructions, with 4 other instructions, then from a performance perspective, if you just had a whole sequence of loads, there'd be a load completing in the write back stage every nanosecond. So from a performance perspective, we can say we're completing an instruction every 1 nanosecond. So you captured it, but I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more. Okay, and I think there was another question. I saw your hand go up right after his.
Oh wait, it wasn't a question I was going to ask. Can you go over the exam we had last week?
Okay.
I have the answers, but I just want you to go over that with us.
Sure.
Like how you get to the numbers, how
Okay.
you did it.
Yep. Yeah, I actually had forgotten that we hadn't gone through. Oh boy. Oh, this should be. 1 second here. I might not have put that on, oh, that might have been a real major brain cramp. I tell you what, let me answer some other questions first, while I try to find that on a thumb drive, because this isn't the computer that I use for that particular purpose, and so I always have to go and put this on the thumb drive. Give me 1 second.
I just want to confirm a terminology thing that I believe I understand it. When we're going through all the classes, you're referring to addresses and bytes interchangeably. Is that because addresses or the computer is byte addressable memory, so you're referring to the address or the byte stored at that address?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep. Oh, come on.
With the pipeline, one thing I just wanted to clarify was that if you have instruction 1 and it goes through to, I believe it's the first, 1 second, the third stage, it starts with 9 control signals and then it goes to 5 by the execute stage. And
Well, the okay, the question is in terms of control signals. 9 get generated in the decode stage, 4 get used during the execute stage, and so the execute stage passes the other 5 on to the EXMEM pipeline register, and then the MEM stage uses 3 of them and takes the 2 remaining ones that aren't used and puts those into the MEM write back pipeline register, and then from there the write back stage uses the final 2.
And just to confirm, these stages are passing along to the execute. After that's done, the execute stage, it's passing along 5 control signals to that pipeline register, the execute MEM, is it pipeline register?
Mm-hmm.
And then those 4 control signals that were used in the execute stage, those are being filled by control signals for instruction 2, correct? Or is that a conceptual misunderstanding?
Okay, so, okay, say that again. Okay, so we're passing along the 5 that haven't been, so for the current instruction, let's say the current instruction is a load word.
Yeah.
So if the decode stage figures out, in fact, let me pull up that slide. The decode stage figures out the 9 control signals for that load word, and then, and so then, as we were saying, so it goes and generates these 9 control signals in the decode stage, in the instruction decode stage, and then So assuming that this is a load word, so then as this load word instruction moves into the execute stage, it will use 4 of them, 2 for the ALU op, 1 for the registered destination, and 1 for ALU source. It will use those 4 in this execute stage, pass the other 5 that are still associated with that load word instruction into the EXMEM pipeline register, along with all the other stuff that the EX stage is putting in there. But what you said about a second instruction, that's
So
what.
if we have like an add after that,
Yeah.
would that add, would those control signals for the EX stage now supplant the control signals that were there? So when they get used up, are they really just being replaced by the next instructions? Or is it something where it's like, it's all done at once when?
Yeah, it's really in the,
Or does it not matter for the-
the load instruction is putting the 9 controls signals in there, and those control signals, along with all the other stuff for that load instruction, all go together, and they move along, and then if there's an add instruction, it's generating 9 control signals that it puts into
Gotcha.
here 1 cycle later.
So I'm sorry.
No, so in other words, it's not as though that add instruction is supplanting the control signals, it's just that, well, the control signals that got used up, they're lost and gone, there's no point, I mean, that it's moved on, and so now as a new instruction comes in, it will have a new 4 control signals for the execute stage, along with its 5 other control signals.
So it just moves to the group. So once
Yes.
those 5 signals that are from the execute stage move on to that pipeline register,
Yep.
then all 9 signals are replaced and updated
Yes.
okay.
Yes, everything all goes together, otherwise things would become really hopelessly
That's why I was
confused.
confused.
Yeah.
I was hopelessly
Okay,
confused.
okay, well, glad I could go and clarify that. Yeah, just as things are moving along, then the control signals get put in there, and so in a case like what we're talking about, then the load instruction is in the execute stage, it's using the 4 control signals, passing the other 4 along, and as part of that load, it's writing a whole bunch of stuff into EXMEM. 1 cycle later, the load is now in this stage, while the add instruction that was behind it, it has now its own 9 control signals. And so, yeah, everything's all done in kind of lockstep. So whatever is in a given pipeline stage is all associated with that particular instruction. In terms of the single cycle data path, I'm going to have to scramble a little bit at the next break to go and find an older midterm that has what you're looking for. But
Another copy?
what's that?
Like,
Oh.
we might have a copy.
Okay, well, if you have a copy, I just
I
don't.
have it.
Did anybody bring the?
Yeah, I have it with all my wrong answers. Is that okay?
I won't show off any of the
Maybe.
wrong answers. So
We just judge them silently.
Okay, actually, I can just put up here. Let me just put up what we're going to cover, and okay, so we've got. Okay, so we've got subtract.
We
7,
don't have to do it.
8,
No.
5.
You have to-
The redirect 1, read data 1, write data, ALU source.
Yeah, that's why I have to do trade. But try to work on the next one, because I can't do it.
But again, just like you did the project, like right. It also helps.
Okay, and the initial criteria is that for the different registers, it's basically 73100 plus the registered number. Okay, so let me just pull up the single cycle data path and let me give this back to you so you can, thank you.
Try and hide my.
Okay. So let me pull up that slide. Okay, so, so let's start out with this first one. We've got this subtract instruction that's going to be writing into register number 7 using these two registers. And the first part of it is asking for, okay, what is read register 1? So for read register 1, well, we're reading two registers, registers 8 and 5, and register 1 is the first. So read register 1 is 8, not the contents, but the read register, that's that 5-bit value. So so we've got that. Read data 1, based on the pattern that I've prescribed for the registers, read data 1 would be the contents of register 8, which would be 73108. And then write data, which, and by the way, on the exam, there were like little labels to go and make it clear which input and output I was referring to. So I think for read register 1, it would have been some label, maybe it was A or whatever, and it was right next to the problem itself. So make sure you're looking for that. Don't overlook that so that way you have any kind of questions. And so then write data, if we're subtracting the contents of register 8 minus the contents of register 5, that's the value that's being written back into the register file. And so it would have been, the correct value for that would have been 3. And if you actually just went and put 73103, I would only take a point off for just kind of not following that. Okay, ALU source. ALU source is this control signal. Is it going to be a 0 or a 1? Well, for an R-type instruction, it's always going to be a 0 because we want to get the second register into the ALU. So ALU source would have been a 0. So any questions on that? You good with that? Okay, now let's do the load word instruction. So it's saying, okay, what is read data 1? So what is the contents of the first register that we read? Well, there's only one register we're reading, and that's this one. And so the contents would be 73108 based on the pattern. And as with any of these, once you do one particular part of the problem, then you start all over. It's not as though the subtract instruction is now modified register 7, and so you need to factor that in. Now, each time you're starting afresh. Now, in terms of the ALU result, well, the ALU result is going to take the contents of this register and add this offset to it. So it's going to be, the ALU is going to be taking 73108 as its top input, and as its bottom input, it's going to be taking the 2's complement representation of -4. This isn't actually asking you to go and show that value, but if I ask for that 2's complement representation, then I would specify that it needs to be in hex. You don't get to put -4. I want you to show what that would be. And so in that case, you would have shown that it would have been, this would have been the 2's complement representation of what would have been that bottom input into the ALU. But you don't have to show that here. You just need to show the ALU result. So 73108 minus 4 is 73104. And then mem to reg, that's this, again, that's this control signal. And this is the one that I think I had to go and clarify for the misprint. And it's a 1 if we're taking a value out of the data cache. It's a 0 if we're taking the ALU result. Well, for a load instruction, we're not writing back into register number 3 the ALU result. The ALU result only gave us the address, and what we're writing back into register 3 is the value that we've got out of memory. So mem to reg needed to be a 1 there. Any questions on that?
Actually, I have a quick question.
Yep.
Is there ever a scenario where, well, I guess maybe you would be in the case of branch, when you do branches, but ever when you would have mem read and mem to reg not be the same? I mean, if you're pulling something from memory, I guess it's kind of assumed you're also going to be using that data. So would you ever have mem to reg is 0 and mem read is 1 or vice versa?
Well, there's 2 mem signals. There's mem write and mem read. If
Right,
you're doing a
they're
mem
two
write,
separate signals.
yeah, but if you're doing a mem write, then you're not getting any value. Actually, on a mem write, that would be a store. So let me ask the question again. So would there be a case where a mem signal is set and we would not have mem to reg set to 1? Well,
Well, no, I mean specifically, so for a load byte, for instance, for a load byte, you're always going to have mem read is going to be 1 and mem to reg is going to be 1.
yes.
So is the reason,
Well, just because they're kind of doing different functions, they may almost always have the same value. But, well, actually, that's not the case, because there are times, like say, for example, if you're doing a store, well, actually, yeah, if you're doing a store, mem to reg is a don't care.
Right.
Okay, well, mem read is not a don't care, it needs to be a 0. So there's kind of a distinction between 0 and don't care. So they're kind of 2 different sort of things, but just if you're doing a load, they're both going to be 1. You're doing a mem read, and you're going to set this to 1, so that value coming out of here gets back into the register. But any time other than a load, mem read is a 0. But if you're doing, say, for example, either a branch or a store, mem to reg is actually a don't care. It's an X. So it's not really the same thing. So there's a subtle distinction there. But on a load, they're both 1. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions on the load here? Okay.
I have a stupid question.
No.
You said the right data, it should be 3, not 73103. And I just wanted to confirm the reasoning behind it.
Back here.
Yeah.
Yes. And well, the reason for that is because the two operands that went into the ALU were 73108 and 73105, and we did a subtract.
That's
73108 minus 73105 is 3.
Gotcha.
And actually, I said I would take 1 point off of like a 6-point question. It might be one of those things where I just go and say, okay, this was just a little brain cramp. I might take at most half a point off, but it's either a half a point or a point. It's just, you need to just be paying
You should
attention.
know that based on.
Well, yeah, and that's, I don't want you just to be robotically going and saying, oh, okay, 7310, I just want you to think it through. So it just isn't quite as thought through if you put 73103 instead of 3. Okay, but it's if it's a 6-point question, use a point at most or half a point. I'm giving you almost everything because I know conceptually you got it. Okay. Any other questions before we go to the store word? Okay, so for the store word, here's our instruction, and we're looking for what's the lower input into the ALU. We'll look at that first of all. So the lower input into the ALU on both a loader and a store is always the offset value. So, excuse me. Thank you. So if it's that offset value, and I asked you to go and show it in hex, then you can't put a -4. What you want to put actually is this value that I already showed over there. Those values, and if you only show like 4 of the digits instead of 8 of the digits, then it'd be like a point off for that. So to get absolute full credit, you'd want to go and show all 32 bits of the 2's complement representation for -4. And then in terms of the data mem write data mem's, just clarifying this write data versus that write data. Again, there's a label that's on the exam, but just to clarify, what is the data memory write data? Well, it's that value that a store is writing out to memory. Well, it's going to be the contents of register number 7 that gets written out to memory. And so the contents of register 7 would be 73107. And this and then reg write. Well, reg write, we do not modify a register in a store operation. We're modifying memory, but we're not modifying a register. So reg write is a false. Okay, so any questions on that one?
Do you mind doing the 2's complement for the lower input ALU just real quick?
Sure. Sure. Let's. For those who didn't hear, it's just can we actually work through the value? Work through that value. So if +4 is, I'm going to have to squeeze this here. 8,
9, 10. Are you doing all 16? Is that what you're?
What's that?
Are you doing all like 15?
All 32 bits.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 4.
Yep.
Okay, that's +4. So -4 is going to be complement each bit and then add 1. So change each bit to 1, each 0 to 1, and each 1 to 0.
Just do a little piece of it. Once we get it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if we add 1, then 1, 0, 1, 1 becomes 1, well, okay, let's just add it. 1 plus 1 is 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 0 is 1, and then 1, and then all these other 1s.
And
So
fall off the edge.
this here is C. Well,
If it went beyond a 30, so it's going to keep on doing 1 all across because it's. Never mind.
Yeah.
I figured out my question.
okay, well, I didn't really get where you were going at, but again, this is our 32-bit version of +4. So just complement each bit and add 1, and so then this is going to be C, and then F, 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 all the other Fs.
Would you recommend doing it that way, like start just with 32? Like, because I've been doing it where I do it with just the last 4 bits. Basically, it looks like it's just 4, for example, and then the F's on them.
Yeah, just make sure that you get all of the bits. It's all whatever you're comfortable with. So as long as you make sure you get it all, as long as they're all all a whole bunch of leading zeros, then you'll get the right answer. Okay. Any other questions before we go on to the branch?
Actually, I have one more question.
Yeah.
Based on this, like, if we put a negative number, the sign extended negative number into the ALU, as with your the load word, the ALU result, it's going to automatically subtract it, so the result wouldn't be like, you wouldn't get the result, which would be the actual address plus our sign extended.
No, it actually, the question is does it just subtract it? And the answer is no, because what a load and a store tell the ALU to do is it tells it to go and perform an add of the register value to the offset value. So let's just quickly do this. So if we have okay, so if we do this, 8 plus C, I don't expect you to do hex arithmetic automatically in your head. 8 plus C, that C is 12, so that's 20. 20 is 16 plus 4, so it's going to be a hex 1, 4. So 4, and then a carry of 1. Everybody okay with what I did there? Okay, 8 and 12 is 20. 20 in decimal is a hex 1, 4. 16 plus 4, so 4, and then the carry of the 1. 1 plus 0 plus F is a 1, 0. Put down the 0, carry the 1. 1 plus F, that's going to be a 1 with a 1, 1. So 1 plus F is 1, 0, plus a 1, so that's a 1, carry of the 1. 1 plus 3 plus F, well, 1 plus F is 1, 0, plus 3, so it's 1, 3. So we put down 3, carry of 1. 1 plus F is 1, 0, plus 7, that's 1, 7. 7 with a carry of 1. 1 plus 0 plus F, 1, 0, put down the 0, carry of 1. 1 plus 0 plus F, that's 1, 0, put down the 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 0 plus F, that's 1, 0, put down the 0, and you get a carry out of the most significant bit, but in 2's complement, that's just part of the business. Okay. Everybody good with that?
So is that the address that would come out of the ALU result?
Yes.
And would we, is there a question where we might have to calculate that ALU result?
Well, actually, I think we did, but I told you to calculate it, but you could just calculate it just using -4.
I just wanted to break it down, so I wasn't sure if I was like doing it the exact right way, going through the pipeline, so.
Yeah. So, yeah, we actually figured it out with 73104. We didn't go through all the hex digits. We just said, okay, 73108 plus a -4. But for those who kind of, weren't that comfortable about, well, if we use the 2's complement representation of the hex digits, will it really come out correct? I now can go and teach another class. So if I hadn't gotten it right, I would have had to quit on the spot.
I have a conceptual question. I'd be surprised if this was on the midterm or the final. But with the single set data path, the reason we had instruction memory and data memory was because we needed 2 caches, because hardware can only do one thing per clock cycle, and by restriction of clock cycle, we need to store the partial values in 2 places. Is that correct so far?
Well, not so much store something in 2 places, but if in one clock cycle, if it's a load, then if our 2 caches were the same cache, or a combined cache, then we'd be fetching the instruction out of the combined cache just to get the whole thing started. And then later on in that same clock cycle, if we had a combined cache, then our load instruction or our store instruction would have to go and be accessing that combined cache a second time in that clock cycle. So we had to have it separately in the single cycle data path. We had to have it separately for kind of a comparable reason in the pipeline, because with the pipeline, we were always having an instruction in the IF stage that was going to be fetching an instruction. And so if the instruction in the data memory stage was a load or a store, it needs to be doing a data memory operation. So we have to have it separate for roughly comparable reasons, although the timing, the breakdown is a little bit different. But in both cases, we don't want to make it so on the same clock cycle, we're having to perform multiple operations on the same piece of hardware.
With pipeline, because it's broken up over multiple clock cycles, why do we still have instruction memory and data? Why do we still have that breakup of hardware if no one uses single cycle?
Well, because in our pipeline, let me pull up the slide just so it's easiest to visualize. we have 5 instructions that are in that pipeline. And so if
So
there are.
it's being used by a different instruction at that point?
Exactly, that is the point, is that it doesn't matter what the instruction is that's in the IF stage, it's accessing the instruction cache. If it turns out that the instruction that's in the data memory stage is a load or a store, then it's accessing the data cache. So it would only be a problem if it would only be a problem of having a combined cache when a load or a store is in the data memory stage. But that means every load or a store would be a problem because we're always fetching an instruction. It's a different instruction than the load or the store. It's a different instruction, but we have 5 instructions all active at any given point in time. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, any other questions before we move on to the branch for the single cycle data path? Let's go back to that slide.
Did you actually cover the branch question on the sheet itself?
Well, I'm doing the exact branch up there, so I'm doing the exact same problem as is on your sheet. So now I think, okay, on the sheet, what did it say that I probably said that this instruction was at address 4000?
6.
Okay, so this is at 6000. Okay, so here's where we'll need to figure out, and it's asking for, okay, what's the lower input into the ALU? Okay, we can figure that out first of all. Let me blow up the picture. Okay, so the low input into the ALU? This is one of those where the 2 values going into the ALU are the 2 registers. And this is one where you will not lose any points whatsoever on a branch, specifically a branch. On any other instruction, you'll lose points because almost any other instruction, if you flip-flop them, you would get an incorrect result. But because on a branch, all we're checking to see is if they're equal or not. If you thought, okay, well, the 3 should be up here, and the 2 should be down here, or the 2 should be up here, or the 3 should be up here, full credit either way. So the answer for the lower input would have been 73102, but 73103 is also perfectly fine. Then the question becomes, what is the top input? What's the top input into the branch target adder calculator, the branch target address adder? What's that top input going to be? Well, if the program counter at the time of the branch getting fetched is 6000, then it's getting 4 added to it, and so that top input into that adder is going to be 6004. Any questions on that? 6004. So this would have been 73102 or 73103. And then the bottom one is, the question is, what's that going to be after the shift left? So quickly, the way that the value that would have been put into the instruction itself, we recognize that the program counter already gets advanced, and so it would have been 1, 2, 3. That would have been our compressed PC relative offset. So here's our opcode, and here's our 2 registers. Our PC relative offset for this instruction, after the assembler compresses it by shifting it to the right by 2 bits, would have been 3. So it would have been 3 as it gets pulled out of the instruction. We get additional leading zeros put into it by the sign extension unit, and then it gets shifted left by 2. So 3 is going to be, this is 3, and we've got the other zeros. If we shift it left by 2, and the answer of the question does say after the shift, then we'll have 2 zeros here. So this is going to be C, and then all the rest of these zeros will still be zeros. So the answer to this bottom input is C. And then that should make sense, because if we just check this out, the add would have been at 6004, 8C, so this label would have been at 6010, and we add those together. That in fact is the calculated value. Okay? Any questions on that one?
Was the 3 from the register number? Is that where you got the?
What I got the 3 from was we could figure out kind of like from the assembler and disassembler type material. Here, let me. I took the conceptual shortcut and said that first of all, my program counter is going to be advanced, and that's shown here by the PC+4 value. So all I did was I just said, well, how many instructions away is the label? It's 1, 2, 3 instructions, or 3 words away. And the number of words or the number of instructions is the same as if we actually calculated out the address and did like the assembler does of shifting it to the right to get rid of the 2 zeros. So the add would be at 6004, 6008, 600C, and this label would be at 6010. So what the assembler did is it took the assembler said, okay, if 6010 is the desired destination if the branch gets taken, and if the PC+4 value is 6004, again, keeping in mind that these are hex, well, this 10 is 16, 16 minus 4 is 12, or C. So the assembler would have said, okay, it's C bytes away, but I've got to go and shift it to the right by 2 bits, and so 1100 shifted to the right by 2 bits becomes 3. So whether you calculate it based on doing the numbers and actually do the shifting, or you just go and say how many words away is it, it still would mean that what the actual PC relative offset would have been 3. Okay? Anything else? Anybody else on any of these?
Why do we have to shift by 2?
Why do we have to shift by 2? Because the hardware does that, because the machine does that, because if we have a limited number of bits, we only have 16 bits here, which gives us a limited range. Not really too bad, but a limited range. The last 2 bits always have to be zeros. So it says, instead of limiting myself to a 16-bit range, where the last 2 bits are always zeros, why use up valuable space if it's always going to end in a 0, 0? And it always has to end in a 0, 0 because we always start our instructions on what's called the word boundary. And since instructions are always, without exception, 32 bits, then that means that the address for any instruction, the hexadecimal address, has got to finish with a 0, a 4, an 8, or a C. And 0, 4, 8, and C, 0, 4, 8, and C, 0 in binary is 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 is 0, 1, 0, 0, 8 is 1, 0, 0, 0, C is 1, 1, 0, 0. So the last 2 bits are always going to be zeros. So the hardware says, well, instead of limiting you to a range on your branches of only a 16-bit plus or minus, I will give you an 18-bit plus or minus. You just don't store those last 2 zeros. So the assembler always goes and takes and shifts what would have been, in this case C, takes what would have been the PC relative offset, shifts it to the right to get rid of those 2 zeros, and compresses it in this particular form. It basically makes it so it's a word offset as opposed to a byte offset. And then the hardware just goes and does a shift left to go and restore those 2 zeros. Okay. Everybody good with that? Any questions on that?
Are we going to have questions that look like that in the exam?
Questions like this? Yeah, I would say very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. In fact, that's part of the reason why I gave this particular test. I mean, I gave the test so you would see, first off, what are the kind of questions you'll see on the single cycle data path, but also, since you've seen the single cycle data path questions, you can kind of envision the comparable questions for the pipeline data path. I didn't want, for any class that has its midterm before I include the single cycle data path, I try to provide this practice exam, so you're not coming into the final exam not having any experience with the data path questions. And for those who didn't do great in the practice exam, this gives you that preparation.
Is the pipeline questions going to look like this as well?
Well, the pipeline questions, like I said, I will typically be giving a sequence of instructions on a pipeline question because with a single cycle data path, we're only handling one instruction at a time. With the pipeline data path, we're handling multiple instructions at a time. So in the pipeline data path, we have 5 instructions in the pipeline at any given point in time. So the pipeline questions are going to be a bit different, but I'll be asking about forwarding and what are values that are going into the ALU and things like that. So they won't be identical to this, but this I think will at least help provide preparation for that.
Can you do like a pipeline questions example?
Okay, let me get to that. I just want to check to see if there are questions here that I should address before we move on to
I was
pipelines.
just wondering when you were going to label the data path on the test too.
With those like label letters, yes,
Okay.
yes. If you didn't hear, if you have the single cycle data path test, you'll see that I have like an A, and then I have all lettered labels for all the different things that I asked for, and I will do that on the final exam as well.
I have 2 questions. One feeds into the other one. With the multiplexer at the very end that the data memory feeds into, we've said a few times in the course, like, oh, this diagram is correct, it has the 0s and 1s in the right place, and with other diagrams, they don't have that. Will there be something on the test where it's like, this is 100% the correct diagram, or something where it's like, you might have to fix it, and you just have to be aware of that?
No, I would be a pretty big jerk to go and say, okay, there's an error in the, and somebody may go and say, well, Dave, that still is in question. But yeah, no, the diagrams that you have will be precise. So you won't have to fix the diagram. So it will be a 1 here and a 0 here, and everything else will be correct.
Perfect. The second question was that whenever we get a chance, would you mind walking us through, like step by step, filling out that the control signal table?
Okay.
Is that
It might be a little more time. What
Okay.
we'll do, in fact, I'll get to the pipeline question. And just while we have this up here, let's just go and do a few scattered control signal questions. So that way,
add in a branch. That's it.
yeah, add in a branch. That'll be fine. So let's. Okay, so if we have an add or any particular R type, then the question's going to be, okay, registered destination. That's always the messy one. Registered destination is the one that says, where are we getting the right register information for that particular instruction? Are we getting it from bits 11 to 15 or 16 to 20? Let me just bump this, I believe, just forward just 1. Yeah. So basically, if we're an R type, our destination register is in bits 11 to 15. If we're a load, it's in bits 16 to 20. So factoring that in, and you will have the two formats available to you. So factoring that in, the destination register is in bits 11 to 15 for an add. So our register destination, let's just do register destination versus, you said branch?
Any branch, yeah, any.
Okay, and where it makes sense, I'll toss in some extras, but it'd be way too time consuming to fill out the whole table. But for register destination, we want that to be a 1 because we want to use bits 11, 15 for that. Whereas with a load, we saw that the destination register was in bits 16 to 20, so that would have been a 0 for a load. And these, because we don't write to a register, these are don't cares. So that's register destination.
Just to go over the X, when you say don't care, what would the actual signal be in that multiplexer?
It would mean that the hardware could pick. It doesn't matter. It could
But
be
it would
either a
always
0
pick
or
a
1.
0 every single time? If we put a 0 on the test, we'd be like, okay, that's close enough. Or
Well,
like you
actually on a test, I won't ask, I better write this down, but I won't ask a question where,
I don't want to box you into a corner. I just want to make sure I don't.
yes
put
you
it
do.
to-
You want to box me into the tightest corner you can put me in. Okay, I won't ask, I will make sure that the answer is not going to be
An X.
an X.
Thank you.
I am such a wimp.
No, you're a great professor. My course eval just got bumped up.
Oh yeah, course evaluations are all done. I can be a mean guy. No, X's are back in. No, so no, I won't ask. I won't ask this. So just maybe doing the highlight type questions. Well, obviously, branch is only true for a branch instruction. Mem read is only true for a load. Mem write is only true for a store. Mem to reg. Here's that kind of important one that we've always been talking about. Mem to reg again is going to be it's going to be a don't care for the bottom two instructions because the whole reason is because reg write is a 0 for these two. And I know all of you are saying, Dave, you just told me you weren't going to ask these, so shut up and move on. So I will shut up and move on. Mem to reg for a load, as we were talking about earlier, this has got to be a 1 so that we get the value out of the data cache, and that gets written back to the register file. So this is a 1 for the load, and for an add, well, we're not doing anything at all with data cache. We just want to go and take the ALU result that got calculated, so that would be a 0. And we obviously do, well, I don't want to say obviously, but we're definitely writing to a register for adds and loads, and that pretty much leaves ALU source and ALU op. For ALU op, you just need for the purposes of something like this, I just want you to know for a load or a store, what operation are we telling the ALU to perform? Add. It's adding. It's adding the, like for, I guess we don't have, like for this instruction right here, it's going to add the contents of a register, which is the top input, and an offset. So it's going to add those two together to form the address. So for load in the store, the ALU op is an add. For an R type, it's going to be whatever the function value is. So does the function indicate it's an add or a subtract or an and or an or whatever? And for a branch, we're telling the ALU to do a subtract. So it takes the two register values, it subtracts them, and just checks to see if the result is a 0. So that leaves really only one. I hope I'm not going too fast. I just don't want to. I don't want to belabor the point. But for ALU source, this, this would be I consider this to be a key control signal. So for ALU source, if we're doing an R-type instruction, then we want two register values going into the ALU, right? If we're doing an add or subtract or anything like that. So ALU source is gonna be a 0 for an R type. For a load or a store, we wanna go and take, as we were talking about, we wanna take a register value and an offset value as our inputs. So ALU source needs to be a 1 for a load or a store. And the tricky one that I will not ask you, ALU source for a branch, because everybody automatically thinks sign extended offset for branches, but what we're putting into the ALU for a branch are the two register values. So I will not ask you that ALU source, but it would be a 0 for a branch. And just so I'm not worrying about it, no ALU source for branch.
I'm gonna get that scrap paper frame just so it doesn't get lost.
Branch.
Yes, yeah, if you didn't hear, the 0 flag is only related to the branch, and it's something that's a calculated output of the ALU. So when we're doing a branch, we put the two register values into the ALU, do a subtract, and just see if the 0 flag gets set. Okay.
But then it's done after that, right? We don't go further for branch if it is 0.
Well, if it's 0, if the 0 flag is true, then that's going to tell this logic up here to take this calculated target address and write it back into the program counter instead of just the +4 value. Okay, so that's what that's used for. Yep.
Actually, this is similar to the last question I asked. Is there a reason why we have both the 0 flag and branch? Because those are scenarios where the 0 and branch are always going to be both 1, which is why we use the AND gate right before it goes to the multiplexer. But there's a reason why you have to have branch, but 0 just sends up 1 if it's due to, or, yeah.
Well, but we can get 0 in many cases when we're not doing a branch. We need the branch signal to go and tell us, I'm doing a branch, because let's say we're doing a subtract instruction, the 0 flag could get set. And in that case, it doesn't mean anything because we need the 0 flag to be set at the same time that we're doing a branch instruction. So if we're doing a branch instruction, sometimes the 0 flag will be set, sometimes it won't, depending on whether the registers are equal.
So the 0 flag is not a separate output rather from the rest of the ALU output? It's actually 0? Or?
Yes, it's a true-false flag that goes to this logic. And think of it as a true-false flag, otherwise you'll get messed up. But basically it's saying, true, I got a 0, or false, I did not get a 0. So, but the ALU is going to generate that for any kind of arithmetic instruction as well. Okay? Yep.
So the branch is just saying this is a branch, and the 0 just says take it or don't take it.
Yeah, it's
so
saying,
take the label or don't take the
yes,
label.
it's that true or false. And so if we're doing a branch and we also got a 0 as our result, if both of those are true, if it's a branch, true, and if our 0 flag also is a true, then that's we get 2 trues into the AND gate, so we get a true into this multiplexer that says, okay, if it's a true into it, says take this calculated value. If it's a false or a 0, it says take the +4 value. Okay.
If you ask about that AND gate, would you ever ask whether it's a 1 or 0 for that AND gate? I mean, it's not complicated.
I think that would be a little more detailed than I would really get into. So, okay. Now, I just want to do a time check because we're at 5 after 8. If people need to use the restrooms, why don't we do if we can just do a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and be doing some pipeline questions. Okay, and any other questions you have. Okay.